Hello, my dear students! Welcome to our virtual class in Practical Research 1. The following are the different most essential learning competencies and specific objectives that you have to achieve at the end of the lesson.
There are different methods of data collection, so every researcher must know how they work in practice, the purpose of each, when their use is appropriate, and what they can offer in students' individual research. Then what do we mean by data? These are plain facts which, when processed, organized, structured, presented in a given context so as to make them useful, they are called information. As defined by Burns and Grove of 2005, these are pieces of information that are collected during a study. These are facts, observations, or experiences that you have gathered from the source of information. On the other hand, when we say research data, these may refer to the recorded factual materials commonly accepted in the scientific community as necessary to validate research findings, which are collected, observed, or created for purposes of analysis to produce original research results. Research data are distinct pieces of information, usually formatted in a special way. They are any information that has been collected, observed, generated, or created to validate original research findings. Qualitative data are forms of information that are gathered in a non-numeric form. These describe qualities or characteristics which cannot be measured numerically. Qualitative research data collection methods are time-consuming, which makes qualitative research more expensive. The benefits of the qualitative approach are that the information is richer and has a deeper insight into the phenomenon under study. Therefore, data is usually collected from a smaller sample than would be the case for quantitative approaches. Qualitative data can be in the form of interview transcript, field notes, video, audio recordings, images, and documents. There are two classifications of data based on their use and source. The first one is what is called primary data, which refers to the first-hand information based on actual experiences or observations. This kind of data is more reliable to use because it is gathered by the actual researchers. The secondary data, on the other hand, are data that are gathered from secondary sources, meaning it is not you that have obtained the information, but rather it comes from previous research, audio recordings, or books. One advantage of secondary data is that it is readily available to use, comparing it to primary data where you have to gather the information yourself. In several qualitative studies, researchers collect a variety of data and spend a significant amount of time in the field collecting information through the use of various data collection methods, which include these four basic types. We have the interview, participant observation, questionnaires, and focus group interview. Let's start with an interview. A research interview, according to Hill and others of 2008, is commonly known as the verbal conversation between two people with the intention to collect pertinent data for the purpose of research. It is an appropriate method to give an in-depth understanding of social phenomenon. In a qualitative interview, it may be face-to-face interviews with the participants or telephone interviews. The research participants are prodded to talk about their experiences, feelings, beliefs, outlooks, and others. It is ideally suited for experience type of research questions. Its purpose is to explore the views, experiences, and motivations of individuals on specific matters. There are three fundamental types of research interviews, which are structured, semi-structured, and structured in accordance with the research design used. When we say structured interview, this type of interview refers to the essentially verbally administered questions in which a list of predetermined questions are asked with little or no variation and with no scope for follow-up questions to responses that warrant further elaboration. The researcher should not ask beyond what is written in the interview questions. However, in a semi-structured interview, This type consists of several key questions that help to define the areas to be explored, but also allows the interviewer or interviewee to diverge in order to pursue an idea or response in more detail. It uses both closed and open-ended questions. This type of interview is a mix of structured and unstructured interview. It may be one of the most common types of interview. You have to prepare a set of questions. However, you are also free to ask follow-up questions to your respondents if you want to clarify something or add information that is not available to you. This type of interview is also flexible. That is why it is preferred to be used by most researchers. Now let's have the unstructured interview. This type is the complete opposite of structured interview. You are not required to make a set of pre-made questions, but rather make an outline or what kind of questions you want to ask to your respondents. These are usually time-consuming and can be difficult to manage and to participate in, as the lack of predetermined interview questions provide little guidance on what to talk about. This uses open-ended questions, which the interviewee or research participants answer freely. The second type of data collection method is participant observation. In this method, the researcher immerses himself or herself in the natural setting of the research participant. This can be a home, an office, an institution, and others. This enables him or her to see, hear, feel, and experience the research participant's daily life. The researcher may take field notes on the behavior and activities of individuals at the research site. It involves the researcher taking lengthy and descriptive notes of what is happening. It is argued that there are limits to the situations that can be observed in their natural settings, and that the presence of the researcher may lead to problems with validity since the participant is aware that he or she is being observed. The different techniques for collecting data through observation are written descriptions, video recording, photographs and artifacts, and documentation. The third data collection method is questionnaires. These are also one of the most common types of instrument that is being used in qualitative research. This is somewhat similar to interviews based on the formats of questions that is being used. Compared to an interview, this is self-administered. It takes less time in answering, but much information cannot be extracted from it since it is usually composed of closed-ended questions. The fourth type of data collection method is the focus group interview. This is about interviewing people with something in common at the same time. This technique is used to elicit the views of a group who have common experiences and interests. They are brought together with the purpose of discussing a particular subject under the guidance of a facilitator who will take note of their discussions. The advantage of this is that critical issues or sensitive ones can be more freely discussed with the group. The focus group interview may take place in natural settings and involve the researcher taking lengthy and descriptive notes of what is happening. The following is a summary model on what to do during data collection. You have to start preparing the questions, then have them validated and pilot test them. Afterwards, write a letter to the interviewees and get the informed consent. Afterwards, ready the materials and the venue. Then, establish rapport, ask questions, probe, and get the inner thoughts. And finally, thank the participants, review the data, and ready the transcript. Aside from what is presented earlier, the following are the different types of qualitative data collection, which are observations, interview, documents, and audiovisual materials. The first type of data collection is the observations or participant observation. In this kind of data collection method, the researcher takes field notes on the behavior and activities of research participants at the research site in their natural setting. The researcher may take the role of complete participant, observer, or non-participant. The following are the different advantages and disadvantages of observations. The second type is the interview. These involve unstructured and generally open-ended questions that are few in numbers and are intended to elicit views and opinions from the participants. It may include face-to-face interview, telephone interview, or group interview. Presented also are the different advantages and disadvantages of interview as a data collection method. Third, we have documents. These take the form of public documents or private documents which are all collected during the research process. Public documents include the minutes of the meetings or newspapers, while the private documents include the journal, diary, emails, or letters. Presented here are the different advantages and disadvantages of document as a data collection method. Lastly, we have the audiovisual materials. It may take any of these, just like the photographs, videotapes, art objects, computer software, and film. Presented here are the different advantages and disadvantages of audiovisual materials. In the data collection process, you have to use research instruments. When we say research instruments, these are measurement tools like questionnaires or scales designed to obtain data on a topic of interest from research subjects. The generic term used by the researchers for research instruments are measurement devices. It must contain the following features or characteristics. When we say usability, it refers to the ease with which an instrument can be administered, interpreted by the participant, and scored or interpreted by the researcher. Please read the following 5 usability considerations. The second characteristic is validity. It is the extent to which an instrument measures what it is supposed to measure and perform as it is designed to perform. It can be external validity or content validity. As a process, validation involves collecting and analyzing data to assess the accuracy of an instrument. When we say external validity, it is the extent to which the results of a study can be generalized from a sample to a population. However, when we say content validity, it is the appropriateness of the content to an instrument. Aside from usability and validity, a research instrument must have the quality of reliability. It can be thought of as consistency. Does it consistently measure what it intends to measure? Now let's proceed to qualitative data analysis. According to Yin of 1994, data analysis consists of examining, categorizing, tabulating, or otherwise recombining the evidence to address the initial propositions of a study. Data analysis differ in quantitative and qualitative research. In a qualitative study, researchers analyze data using themes and codes. When we say themes, these are features of participants' accounts characterizing particular perceptions and/or experiences that the researcher sees as relevant to the research question. Themes are small categories that appear as major findings in qualitative studies and are often used as headings in the finding sections of studies. Theming refers to the drawing together of codes from one or more transcripts to present the findings of qualitative research in a coherent and meaningful way. Coding, on the other hand, is the process of labeling and organizing your qualitative data to identify different themes and the relationships between them. Coding involves assigning a word, phrase, number, or symbol to each coding category. The codes can be based on ideas, concepts, terms, phrases, and keywords that suggest how the associated data segments inform the research objectives. In addition, Gibbs of 2007 defined it as a way of indexing or categorizing the text in order to establish a framework of thematic ideas about it. The following are the 3 kinds of coding. First is the open coding. In this type, the data that have been collected are divided into segments and then they are scrutinized for commonalities that could reflect categories or themes. Similar comments are grouped together to form categories. The second type is the axial coding. Connections are made amongst the categories and subcategories in this type of coding. This involves putting data together in new ways by making connections between the categories. This can be achieved by exploring the conditions, context, action or interactional strategies, and consequences which influence the phenomena and/or social processes that are being studied. The third is selective coding. This is the process of selecting the core or main category and then systematically relating it to the other categories. During this process, the categories and their interrelationships are combined to form a storyline that describes what happens in the phenomenon that is being studied. Let's try to illustrate the three kinds of coding. Let's start with the open coding. At this point, you should have started collecting qualitative data such as transcripts from interviews. With open coding, you have to break your data into discrete parts and create codes to label them. Then let's have the actual coding. In actual coding, you begin to draw connections between codes. You have to organize the codes that you have developed in open coding. With actual coding in qualitative research, you read over your codes and the underlying data to find how your codes can be grouped into categories. These categories are the axes around which its supporting codes revolve. In selective coding, it is where you connect all your categories together around one core category. The core category you develop in selective coding may come from elevating one of the categories from the actual coding stage, or may be a new category that you have derived based on your other categories. The core category ultimately represents the central thesis of your research. Coding qualitative research to find common themes and concepts is part of thematic analysis, which is part of qualitative data analysis. When we say thematic analysis, it is when themes are extracted from text by analyzing the word and sentence structure. There are 5 different types of qualitative data analysis. The first one is content analysis. This is the most common example of qualitative data analysis. It refers to the categorization, tagging, and thematic analysis of qualitative data. It is used to evaluate patterns within the content or sources of information, such as from photographs in newspapers through political speeches. Content analysis is used to analyze and interpret verbal data or behavioral data. Content can be analyzed descriptively or interpretatively. Content analysis is the method of analyzing written, verbal, or visual communication messages. The second type is the narrative analysis. This refers to listening to people telling stories and digging into what that means. The assumption here is that stories form a functional purpose. It is used to analyze text that may come from a variety of sources. It often involves reformulating stories presented by people in different contexts and based on their different experiences, including transcripts from interviews, diaries, field notes, surveys, and other written forms. The third type is discourse analysis. This is about analyzing language in its social context. In other words, it's all about analyzing language within the culture and society it takes place. It is a method of analyzing naturally occurring spoken interactions and written text and is concerned with the social context in which the communication occurred. It focuses on how language is used in everyday life and looks at how people express themselves. The fourth type of qualitative data analysis is the grounded theory. This method of analysis starts by formulating a theory around a single data case. The intention is to explicitly create theory using data through a series of tests and revisions. Grounded theory is also called analytic induction. This is a method that attempts to develop causal explanations of a phenomenon from one or more cases being studied. Explanations are altered as additional cases are studied until the researcher arrives at a statement that fits all cases. Lastly, we have the Interpretive Phenomenological Analysis or IPA. This is designed to understand the experiences of a subject in relation to a major life event, experience, or situation. These phenomena may range from those that are common to those which are rare. IPA is subject-centered, often only having a very small sample size. The following are the steps in data analysis. First, organize and prepare the data for analysis. Print out your transcripts, gather your notes, documents, or other materials, then mark the source or any demographics that you may have collected or any other information that will help you analyze your data. Then, Read through all the data. This will require you to read your data, probably several times, to get a sense of what it contains. You may want to keep your notes about your thoughts, ideas, or any questions that you have. Gain a general sense of the information and reflect on the overall meaning. Third, conduct analysis based on the specific theoretical approach and method. This involves coding or organizing related segments of data into categories. Use highlighters, notes in the margins, sticky pads, concept maps, or anything else that helps you to connect with your data. Afterwards, generate a description of the setting or people and identify themes from the coding. Search for theme connections. Identify recurring themes, language, opinions, and beliefs. Next, represent the data within a research report. Consider your audience, the purpose of the study, and what content should be included to best tell the story of your data. Lastly, interpret the larger meaning of the data. Make sure that the research questions were answered. The third chapter of your research study is the research methodology. This is a description of how exactly you will conduct your research. You will just present what you will do and how you will do it. It contains all the steps and procedures that you are going to use for you to finish your paper. There is no general format on the parts of the methodology since it can be different for qualitative and quantitative research. Research methodology is the specific procedures or techniques used to identify, select, process, and analyze information about a topic. The methodology section answers how were the data collected or generated and how it was analyzed. The following is an example of instrumentation. This is an example on how you will state your data gathering procedure. This is an example on how you will state your data processing procedure.
That's all about our lesson for this week in Practical Research 1. Thank you for watching and see you again next week.